All right, we're going live. And the number is going up. So I'll wait till we get a few more on and then I'll just start going over some of the guidelines. But welcome to tonight's webinar. We are so excited that everyone is joining us. So I definitely want to make sure we start on time because we have a lot of things to cover. So I will get started now. So good afternoon and welcome to Benco's webinar tonight, Gateway 2021, Crossing the Bridge in Dentistry. My name is Kay Huff and I will be your Benco host for this afternoon. Before we get started, I just want to do a few housekeeping rules for your CEs. Number one, please make sure that you signed up under your legal name. And what I mean by that is the name that's on your license. It's going to be really important if you get checked out that you have the right name on it. So please make sure you signed up with the correct name. And also, please make sure that you log on to your own computer. So, if you're watching it with someone, we have to make sure that we see your name on there so that you can receive your CE for tonight, your 1 hour CE. And then if you also are listening to it on your telephone, it's okay. Now, if you push the link on your telephone and where you're seeing it, that's perfectly fine. But if you're listening to it on your telephone, we can't see that. All we see is your phone number. So all I'm going to ask for you to do is to please email me, and I'll give this to you again later, so don't panic. But please email me your name, your telephone number, and the course title for tonight. And you're going to email that to practicecoaching@benco.com. Again, that's practicecoaching@benco.com. And I'll give it to you again at the end. So also tonight, you will receive a survey. Please make sure that you fill out your survey. We definitely want to know what you want to hear, what you want to know more about, what you'd like to see more webinars on. So please make sure you fill that out because we really want your feedback. Also, at the very bottom, you're going to see a Q&A. Bob and Chuck are going to be answering your questions at the end of the webinar tonight. So please make sure as the webinar is going along, go to the bottom where it says Q&A, type in your questions, and we're going to do our best to answer them live. If we don't get to all of your questions live, Bob will answer those questions, and then everybody on tonight will also get a copy of those questions. So with that being said, let's get started. I'm honored to introduce the most outstanding leader in the dental field today who has not missed hardly any of these webinars, the Managing Director of Benco Dental, Chuck Cohen. Hey, Chuck.
Hey, Kay, thank you for having me tonight. Welcome everyone to this great program. I am flattered and honored to introduce you guys to Bob Zamrock, one of Benco's most experienced. And when we say most experienced, it doesn't mean he's one of our oldest. We actually have people older than Bob, but Bob is definitely one of our most experienced field service technicians. He's a master service tech and a field supervisor. That means he's been through a whole lot of training and he supervises others in the field. He's based in upstate New York, but the wisdom that he's going to share with us this evening translates well to every area of the country. So Bob, this I think is your third evening seminar with this with us. Is that correct? Is this your third one?
That's correct, Chuck. Thank you very much.
And the other two have been very, very well received. So Bob is going to spend a few minutes tonight, and then we'll have time for Q&A, talking about everyday maintenance tactics for your practice. Before I turn things over to Bob, I want to remind, as Kay did, that in the chat, there's a place to put in your questions. Please enter your questions as we go, whether it's on something Bob's talked about or not. Bob's been known to fix everything in the field. So tonight he's going to talk mostly about core equipment and some other things, but feel free to ask about anything. So Bob, with that, I'll turn things over to you, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Good evening, everybody. We're going to go over basically the everyday things that you see in your operatory. And I'll try to hit as general and specific as possible without spending too much time on one topic, and we can move on to the questions if anybody has anything in particular they want to talk about. One of the first areas I'd like to start with is vacuum accessories. Now, both pictures here are two different vacuum traps that you'd see in an office. And it's very important to clean these, replace them. They both have disposable traps in them. If you don't have a supply of them in your office, please make sure you do have them. When you do clean your vacuum lines, use warm water with an enzymatic cleaner, something that's going to kill or eat the organic material that's in the lines that not only cleans the material out, but also gets rid of a lot of the odor that's in there also. You have valves for all your vacuum. You have a saliva ejector valve and high volume valves. This is a very big service call item for technicians for Benco. And they're actually very easy to take care of in the office. They all come apart fairly simply, and there's a couple O-rings inside the valves that you just need to make sure that all the debris is cleaned off of, and you can put a little bit of lube on them and snap everything back together. One of the biggest complaints are the tips not holding in, or stuff falls out of them, and either you have a rubber top that pops onto them, or you have an O-ring that's inside, and you just take the O-ring out and replace it, and you're good to go. Amalgam separators, most have a clear container in them. They have a fill line, so you just change them out when need be. But one thing that's really been odd since the startup of COVID, or after the startup of the big COVID event, is we're seeing a lot of vacuum lines now just putting a lot of debris down the lines and plugging amalgam separators. And now we're needing to get plumbers into the offices and clean them out. So it's just very imperative that you run the cleaner through on a regular basis. Keep those lines as wet as possible. You want a lot of moisture in there, and that seems to help not getting big pieces of scale that come off and then plug up these amalgam separators. Here's an example of what happens when you don't use a vacuum cleaner. This line's one of my customers I was at, and that is the vacuum line that would go to one of the valves, and it is plugged solid, about 3 inches full of, it's basically like a sand paste mix. You just need to run water through. You know, if you're, especially in hygiene, a lot of prophy powder you're using, you just run water through your vacuum line after every patient, and that would eliminate a lot of this. Syringes. Another high service call rate item. Water leaking, air leaking. As you can see, all the syringes have some kind of valve that controls the air and the water. And those valves, some of them just pop right off. Some have a little set screw that you can see in one of the diagrams. Each one's a little bit different, but they all operate basically the same way. There's a series of O-rings and valves in there. If you have water leaking out, a lot of times what you can do is just pull the valve out and clean it and get whatever debris in there out, put it back in with a little fresh lube on it, and the problem's solved. Or if it sticks and you've got water constantly dripping out of your syringe tip, you just pull that water valve out, clean it out, and pop it back in, and that'll go, you know, fairly well for you. One little trick that we use in the service department is if we don't have the kit for your specific syringe on our van, or you don't have it in your stock in your office, you can take and swap the valves out, put the air valve into the water valve and the water valve in the air valve. It's a little bit better to have a little bit of air leaking than water leaking. The syringe tips on the hubs also, you can see both of these style syringes that are up on the screen. There's a series of O-rings in there. And that's usually what all you need to do is change the O-ring, or you can buy one of the kits that includes everything in there. And depending on what brand you have, most of them all come with the tools and a little tube of lubricant for them. Usually within 5 or 10 minutes, you can just replace that whole hub assembly and you're done with the syringe. Other things is looking at the tubings on them too. A lot of times the tubings crack on them. I don't have a picture of the tubing, but there's just usually just barb fittings on the bottom that push into them, and you can just pull that tubing out and cut it and then stick it right back in, and that would solve a leak problem for you. Scalers, Cavitrons. This is another item where we get no water out of a Cavitron, was really what this is kind of geared towards. There's an illustration on the bottom of the screen that basically shows from your water supply all the way to your scaler. And there's a little disc that's the water filter for it, and that needs to be replaced. And it really depends on where you're at and what kind of water you have, how often that you get replaced. And you can see it's kind of like a translucent device, and you'll see that it gets darker and darker as it starts to fill up with sediment. So you just replace it as needed. Usually when we do PM, like I do PM for a lot of customers that I have, and I'll replace these depending on where they're at, either once a year or twice a year, and then you usually don't have any problems with them.
So Bob,
Yes, sir.
there's Q&A already, so let's answer those questions before we go on to the next topic. Before
Sure.
we do that, we want to make sure everyone understands PM stands for preventive maintenance. So everyone understands what that is. So we had a question come in already that said about, going back to the saliva ejectors, should we run warm water through the saliva ejector after suctioning excess fluoride varnish?
Definitely.
Okay. And no matter what you're doing with the saliva ejector, it's always good to run warm water through it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes. After you're done with the patient, if you just run a little bit of warm water through, it really does flushes all that down, so it doesn't have a chance to build up in the tubings or on your piping.
And then as far as the end of the day is concerned, you want to use a special cleaner. You said run water through the lines. Can it be just water at the end of the day, or does it have to be a special cleaner?
Now, you want to run a cleaner
a little bit. Yeah, talk about the cleaner and what is the protocol, the procedure, best practice for cleaning at the end of the day. During the day, warm water, keep things moving. At the end of the day, what should people do?
At the end of the day, you want to use an atomizer and a specific cleaner for the vacuum lines. And you want to be careful with the pH level of the cleaner because it could damage the rubber goods that are inside your pump. So your pH needs to be somewhere around 7. And you want it to be an enzymatic cleaner, like I said earlier. An enzymatic cleaner basically is it eats away at the organic material that's in there. And it also coats all the tubings and the piping. So it just starts to eat away at that waste. So all that waste that's inside the lines gradually breaks down and dissipates in small parts that are easy to pass through the system. Instead of one big piece, like I was saying before, I've never seen so many offices have so many problems with big pieces of, basically biofilm that's inside the lines break apart and come down and plug things up, as we have now post-COVID.
So let's talk a bit about the atomizer, because I think that's a really good point. A lot of offices miss that. The atomizer is that thing that looks like a doggy dish, right?
Correct. And one of the first ones that came out on the market was made by Air Techniques, and they're giving them for free when you're buying a vacuum pump. And we all call them a doggy dish because that's exactly what it looks like. It was a yellow dish, and it had a couple little applicators on it on the top of it, and you just put a quart of the solution inside of it mixed with water, and you would put each device on there, open them up, open up your saliva ejector, open up your high volume, and it would just automatically take that. And what it does is it draws up literally by molecule the water per se, not a big water stream that comes in, not a solid water stream. You don't want a solid water stream. That doesn't really clean anything. When it comes up in the smaller particles, it kind of circulates and whips through there, and it's kind of like a scrubbing action also with the enzymatic cleaner. So.
Right. So very, very important. So when you use the enzymatic cleaner, you want to use that atomizer because it sort of creates a wall of almost like a spray, right, Bob?
Right. Yeah, it's like more of a mist. Yes.
It mixes the air with the solution. But as Bob said, just flushing the lines with the solution at the end of the day, that just goes through the middle of the hole, right? It doesn't go. It doesn't really clean the gook off of the wall of the hoses. Correct?
No, correct.
All right, good. Okay, so at the end of the day, do you have a special cleaner that you recommend to your customers, or any of them work as long as
I really don't. Is like I said, as long as it's enzymatic and it has a pH of 7.
Mm-hmm. Now, someone asked, so pH of 7 is important because pH of 7 is neutral, right? It's not too acidic and it's not too basic, right?
Right. Yeah.
So someone asked specifically, is PureVac a good product? And I think we would say yes, PureVac is a great product for that.
I see it used everywhere. A lot of places, I shouldn't say everywhere. I see it used in a lot of offices, and I don't see any problems with any equipment. And it seems to work well.
Yeah, PureVac's a great product. So someone asked, you said keep lines moist when speaking of the amalgam separator. Do you mean the vacuum lines in the operatories, or
yes? Like we said, after you do a cleaning with prophy paste or something, or if you have a lot of organic material that you suck up, just when you're done with the patient and you're cleaning up the room, just run some excess of water through there. It just helps flush that out and keep everything moist.
Someone else asked about Slug Buster from Easy Dent. I've never heard of that one. Have you heard of that cleaner?
Yes, there's actually there's probably about 4 different products that I know of that are similar like that. It's kind of like a foaming action thing where it just kind of does everything like Drano type thing. If you're doing it from the beginning of an office, you just open the office, the lines are fresh and new, and you do it on a regular basis, it's great. If you have an older practice and you use it for the first time in 15 years or so, you have the potential just to let go of a lot of things in that line, and you're going to fill up a lot of those filters down your amalgam separator and the filter on the vacuum pump. And we see that a lot of times when people start using products like that. One of the vacuum pumps that does recommend a slug buster product is Ramvac. And when we put like you see, we replace a wet ring pump, a vacuum pump with a dry system, a Ramvac, the first time that they do that, you'll get a lot of debris that comes through, and you need to watch your filters then.
So it's not a bad thing. You're getting stuff out of the lines.
Yes.
But you just have to watch the filters if the filters don't fill up too quickly. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah, just make sure you have a backup filter all the time.
Everyone should have backup filters. We're going to talk about that before we finish tonight, but everyone should have backup filters in their office. That's great. Okay, good. Someone wrote, I've heard offices running hot water through the lines to melt or dissolve the buildup. I've also heard people run cold water to prevent bacteria from growing. Which is best, warm or cold?
I personally suggest the warmest tap water that you can get. The reason being is everything is plastic or vinyl or silicone. So if you get that a little bit warmer, it expands a little bit, and then it releases the waste materials that are on those sidewalls. You get a cleaner vacuum line internally. The cold water is not cold enough to stop or inhibit any kind of growth. So
I was going to say, yeah, there's no way the water is cold enough to prevent bacteria from growing. Right?
No, there's not. And then that's the reason why I recommend using an enzymatic cleaner, because that enzymatic cleaner, the enzymes that are in there will break down all that organic, the stuff that's growing in there that you don't want to grow in there.
Exactly. Great. All right, good. Those are all the questions we have so far, Bob. So why don't we go on to scalar water filters?
Okay, perfect. Again, the scalars, I think I covered most of this, didn't I, Chuck?
Mm-hmm.
I think they're pretty good. Water bottle care. This is another big service call. Water bottles, you hear them hissing either air or you're not getting water out of a water bottle. There's quite a few things that are associated with the water bottle that you can do that. There's always either an O-ring or like on this one diagram shows a urethane washer. That's really what seals the bottle to the housing, and so you don't get an air leak. And 2 things that can be wrong is that urethane washers needs to be replaced, or your bottle actually has problems with the threads in the bottle. Most of them are all plastic bottles, and we see that a lot. I mean, I don't think I know a technician that doesn't carry at least an extra 0.7 in a 2-liter bottle on their truck, because we're replacing them on a constant basis because they're leaking. And it's always the threads. It's more often the threads than any of the washers or O-rings on them, because you're constantly screwing and unscrewing them all day long to fill them with water. Waterline maintenance, there's a lot of products on the market. Tablets, which are on the top, and then inline products, which are on the bottom here. I don't really have a preference for any of them. One thing that I will say, again, another COVID related thing that I've never seen before, using like a steri pen or something like that in a bottle, we've seen an extraordinary large amount of them being plugged. I've never seen one plugged before, and now I've probably run across it 10 or 12 times, which is really unusual. And I don't know if it's a water supply issue or where you're getting your water from, but I've never seen those plug up like that. At first, for being dry as long as they were and then re-immersion them, I don't know if that was it or not, but I've never replaced so many ever, in a short time. Seems to tail off a little bit, but it's been it was very consistent for a while. Whatever you use, just make sure you're consistent with it. The tablets are probably one of the easier things to use, because every time you fill the bottle, you put a tablet in and you're done. With the filters or the pens, they all have, you need to know when their life is over and when they're no longer providing the service that they need. I know, like, some of them you'll have to test with a strip, or you do by a time. The SteriPen that's shown here is actually good for 365 days, which makes it very convenient. So once a year, you take and replace that pen. Or you can get an iodine strip, and you'll need to know when it's not producing enough iodine to kill the germs in the water for you. Now we talked about the water care. The water bottle is also a source of bacteria. So you need to take and clean or shock your bottles. And this slide shows exactly, at this point, every manufacturer, this was what they recommended at one point all the time. And this will take and shock your bottle and kill all the germs in the bottle, and you're good to go. This disinfectant solution also works for shocking your system. And again, when water bottles first came out, this was every manufacturer's recommendation. You would take and put this in the water bottle, and then you would run it through your dental unit, let it sit for 10 minutes, and then flush everything out with clean water again. So that's a way you can take and disinfect your dental unit, and then go back to using whatever you're using, whether you're using the SteriPen or a tablet or anything like that.
So
Well,
Bob, we had a question that came in while you were talking. So someone said that they use distilled water in their water bottles. What's your feeling about distilled water? And then we'll get to the question. Is it necessary to use distilled water in the water bottles or not?
My manager and I just had a meeting about this not too long ago, because this has changed since since bottles were first started used. The reason why bottles came along was because of all the biofilm that was built up in the tubings and things. So initially, everybody recommended either a sterile water or a distilled water, so you didn't have any kind of impurities in there at all. And now they're starting to change that, and some of the manufacturers still say a highly filtered water or / distilled water, or they'll say a potable water, whichever is acceptable drinking water in your area. That's something that's fairly new, a couple years maybe. As long as it's clean water, that's what you want in there. It's not only going in your patient's mouth, obviously, but it's also going in your equipment. So you want to keep it clean in there.
I'm glad you have that priority right. It's the patient's mouth and the equipment. And we know Rob, we know what you think is most important, which is great.
Right. There are concerns when you have a patient that has some kind of kidney failure by using a distilled water, because of there's no minerals in it and it could harm their kidneys. You have to use such a large amount of that water. I kind of studied this a little bit. I used to work at a medical center, and I took care of the dialysis equipment, and part of my job was water quality. And those are some big questions there. And basically, it's just anything that's come in contact with the human body, you want it as clean as possible.
So your recommendation is distilled water sounds like it's better, but not required. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Correct.
Second,
or a very high filtered water.
Or very highly filtered water. Then the next question is, even whatever kind of water you're using, drop a tab in the bottle every day, correct? You start the day, put a tab in there, but you don't have to change the tablet. You don't have to put a new tablet in until the next day.
Correct, yeah.
Not every time you fill the water bottle. Or is it every time you...
Most of them, they recommend that you put one tablet every time you fill the bottle.
Okay, so every time you fill the bottle. So but most offices may only fill the bottle once a day. But regardless, every time you fill the bottle, put a tab in.
Yes.
Okay. Next question. Do the iodine strips cause problems with patients who are allergic to iodine?
You're not. The only place you're using the iodine strip is you would take and just flow a syringe onto the strip. You're not using that on the patient's mouth or anything like that. It's just a test strip outside of the dental unit. You're going to flow water onto it.
So you're not putting the iodine strip in the water bottle?
You're not putting it in the water bottle. You're putting it...
You're just using it as a test?
Correct, yes.
Okay, got it. All right, good, thank you. Do you put the tablet in the bottles, or is the tablet for the end of the day when flushing the lines, or both? I think what we'd established is every time you fill that water bottle, put a tablet in.
Correct, yes.
And then
whenever the bottle's empty and you fill
the bottle's empty, put it in. And then last is flushing lines daily. This is not really a question, but let's see where we go with this. Flushing lines daily, citracillin bottle, monthly shocking of lines sufficient. So let's start with the last thing first. assuming that you believe that you should shock the lines, I think everyone does. How often should an office shock the lines?
The
water
general
lines?
practice for shocking is usually once a month.
Once a month. A lot of it though depends on the quality of the water in your area. That's the one thing that
Yes.
we should re-emphasize. We cannot emphasize enough times is there are certain areas where the water quality is worse and certain areas where it's better. So you need to temper these recommendations a little bit for the quality of water in your area, right? So if the water quality is lousy, you may need to shock your lines more often, right?
Absolutely, yes.
In general, the recommendation is once a month, but that needs to change sometimes depending on the quality of the water.
Correct. And they got, whoever's servicing your equipment really should have a good handle on the water quality in the area. And I know our guys do very well with that. And they'll make recommendations when we sign people up for preventive maintenance. And if we're going to do that, if we're going to be in enough to start doing those things for the customer, we put it right as routine for what we do, or you can suggest it when you go into the office.
Got it. Let's see. Do we need to flush water lines for 20 to 30 seconds between patients if we're using steri straws?
Most manufacturers, both of the water treatment products and for the dental units themselves, at the beginning of the day, you should flush your units for 20 to 30 seconds. You want to get anything that grew in there overnight flushed out. You want fresh water in there. In between patients, some manufacturers recommend it, some don't. That is a very good practice to do, is to run some water after you take and you wipe down the unit, pull your handpieces off, your syringe tips off, flow a little bit of water. That just cleans everything right out.
And then somebody asked the question, so it's a good question I hadn't thought about before. I think I know the answer, but how often should you change the water in the bottle if you don't use it much during the week? I think I know the answer to this, but Bob, what do you think? What's the answer?
If you don't go through it in a week, at the end of the week, drain that bottle out.
You I was going to say every day you should start out with fresh water in that water bottle, but you can use that.
Not if you're using tablets and you're,
okay.
Yeah.
So basically you can let the water sit in the bottle until it's used up, but basically at the end of the week, if there's anything left, throw it away.
Right. And
okay.
One of the easy things to do to purge your system is you just empty the water out of your water bottle, screw it back on the unit, turn it on, run your hand pieces, or just use a flush valve or run your hand pieces in your syringe, and you blow all that water out of the system. So now you've got no water in there to grow bacteria.
Got it. Someone asked, is molecular iodine safe to use in the bottles through the unit? I don't know what that means. What is molecular iodine?
No,
I don't think so.
Yeah, I wouldn't use iodine in the bottle. No, because
I think that could corrode your units and stuff, and I'm not sure you want it in the patient's mouth either. So right?
No, like I said, we talked earlier about the iodine strips. I think that might have been the misconception.
That's the confusion.
Yeah.
Iodine strips are a test strip. They should not be put into the water bottle. The
No,
water bottle should only have distilled or clean or filtered water plus a tablet, and that's it. Right. It should go in the water bottle. Okay, good.
Right.
So someone asked the question, what does it mean to, this is kind of funny. We have to be very clear. Someone asked what it means to shark the lines, meaning S-H-A-R-K. We're not talking about sharking the lines. We're talking about shocking the lines, S-H-O-C-K. So Bob, can you spend a minute or two talking for those maybe who are unfamiliar? What does it mean to shock the lines?
Shock the lines means that you're going to put a high level of disinfectant in there for a short period of time to make sure that you kill any of the bacteria that's growing in there. And this disinfectant solution in 9 parts of water to 1 part of chlorine is what you could use for something like that. Or there's other products on the market that advertise and do the same thing. This is the cheapest and most basic way to do it. Chlorine is a great product that's used. All of our water treatment plants use it in our potable water now. But you don't want to sit in there too long because it can damage your unit. And obviously you don't want any of that high of a concentration. You don't want to go into a patient's mouth either.
All right. So now we got another question. There seems to be some confusion. So let's just make we're clear. Somebody said, regardless of how many times you fill the bottle during the week, we should empty the water bottle at the end of the week. And should we empty lines of water at the end of each week?
That is the best practice. Most manufacturers do recommend that you do that, or you're going to have to flush really for 2 or 3 minutes on Monday morning per se.
Right. So what you want is in a perfect world, you want really no water in the lines over the weekend when it sits for a long time. And you really don't want water sitting in the water bottles over the weekend, correct, Bob?
Correct. Like we talked about shutting down the practice before COVID for a long period of time. If you're not going to be using that dental unit for a week or two, let's say you're going on vacation, the practice is closed or whatever, you want to take and purge all that water out. You don't want that water sitting in there. It's a dark place, and your offices, are climate controlled. So dark, warm places grow bacteria.
So someone said, when the water bottles are empty, do we continue to flush the lines to dry out the tubing? And if so, how often?
That's all you need to do is run your tube, run it until air comes out, and you're fine.
Got it.
That's only when you're purging the units.
All right. I think that's all. There's some debate in the Q&A about molecular iodine. I'm going to take a look at that, Bob, while you move on. We'll come
All
back
right.
with this in a minute. You go first. Go ahead.
Okay. So we'll move on from the water bottle stuff to the actual dental units. The picture on the right is a junction box that you would see either on the floor by the chair, and somewhere in that junction box, you're going to see something very similar to what's on the left side, where there's a filter. For your city water connection and for your air connection, you're going to have a regulator with a filter. Almost every unit has it. These filters need to be changed on a regular basis. They're small, most of them are just a small little round or small white cylinder. And about once a year is all that you should need to do it. Unless you have city water and you know that you have hard water or high contaminant water, high sediment, you're going to need to change that water filter a little more often. The air one, only once a year. You don't see much contamination in the air. Water purification systems. This has become very big now, where instead of buying distilled water all the time, we're going to have built-in water purification systems. This system is built in underneath the Steri Center. And if you look at the picture, one of the greatest things that the manufacturers of these systems have done now is they put these numbers with colors on them. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the manual for all of them, it'll tell you which filters have to be replaced when. Some filters need to be replaced once a year, every other year, every 3 years. So that way you're not just replacing everything arbitrarily. There's an actual method to it that makes sense. And when you get a system like this, you also get a parts per million meter for your water. So you want to measure that at one of your dispensers. And once you start seeing anything over 1 part per million of water, you know something's going on. So you're going to have to do some kind of maintenance. But if you're doing the maintenance on a regular basis with these units, you should have no problem at all. When you do maintenance on these also, there is an injection port, and I didn't get a close-up picture of it, but you sanitize these systems at least once a year also, especially if you're getting high bacteria or high counts. And there's a port in there, and they come with a syringe where you inject bleach into it. You let it sit for about 10 minutes, flush it all out again. And it's no different than like a bottled water system on your unit. It needs to be, sanitized every so often. In the basement, you'll see, mostly in a basement or a closet, you'll see one of these guys. This is a whole building filtration. This is basically for sediment only. But we get a lot of calls to offices where they don't have any water to like half of the office. And it's this guy here. And if you see up on the upper right-hand corner, there's a blue bag up there with 2 white filters. Those are the extra filters that are there. I always leave them right with the unit. So, and there's that round tool on the left side. That's the tool that takes it off. It's fairly simple to do. The only thing is you want to have a bucket underneath it when you replace it, because once you release the pressure that's in there, there's water still in that container. So you can get water all over yourself if you're not careful. These should be replaced once a year in an office, unless you're in a high sediment area. Again, just like we were talking about with the units with the city water. Autoclave maintenance.
All right, wait, hold on, Bob. Before we go to autoclaves, let's go back to water because there are more questions. So the first one is someone named Raha Mozaffari wrote in about molecular iodine. So now I understand because I looked at the article that they sent in. So molecular iodine seems to be effective against COVID-19, but used as a mouth rinse. So Bob, I think what this person is saying is, should we put molecular iodine into the water that we flush through the unit and it comes out the air water syringe. I don't think that makes sense to me. And I'm not sure that you want to flush molecular iodine through a dental unit. You might end up with clogging or sediment, but maybe you know something that I don't know.
I have never heard of using that, and the only thing that I can equate it to is when the bottled water systems first came out. A lot of people thought it'd be a good idea to put mouthwash in them because it would taste better. That just gummed up units like there was no tomorrow. The service calls went through the roof. So please stop doing that. It should just be water in there.
Yeah, so I want to reinforce that molecular iodine, as is mentioned in the article that was submitted, is really about using molecular iodine as a patient mouth rinse. Great idea. Put it in a little plastic cup, have them rinse with it, and that I'm sure that does wonders against COVID-19. No argument there. I think the issue, though, as Bob mentioned, is molecular iodine in the dental units. We don't know of that it will work or not work. I suspect I wouldn't put anything through my dental unit that wasn't water or those tablets, just because you want to be careful. The dental units are pretty precise. They're precision equipment. There's a lot of metal and plastic in there, a lot of small bore tubing. Until we know more about it, I think our recommendation would be do not use molecular iodine, or for that matter, any other additive into the water in the water bottle or the dental units. Bob, we're good with that as a recommendation?
I definitely agree with that strongly.
All right, good. So let's see. And then he said, the practice they're buying, use it so you can replace back to distilled water. Thank you. Glad to help. Yes, good idea. What product did you say we should use to flush and protect the vacuum lines? We talked about that before, but PureVac with an atomizer. We talked about the atomizer, very, very important. Any enzymatic cleaner that's rated for vacuum lines will work. PureVac would be the most popular, but there are other ones as well. Correct, Bob?
Yes.
Okay.
And the pH level, you want to look at the pH level.
pH level should be neutral, about 7. You won't get in trouble with PureVac. It's a product that we sell, everybody sells, easy to get. So that certainly is a good answer. And there are other ones as well. All right. Good and good. Let's see. Someone asked sort of an unrelated question, but related, of course, is what is the routine for preventive maintenance if you have a new office? How often do you recommend an office do a complete preventive maintenance check?
Every manufacturer recommends every piece of equipment being looked at least once a year. But depending on the volume and the actual equipment that you have, it may be more often. For a general practitioner, let's say 2 or 3 doctors or so, maybe twice a year is plenty. And unless you start to see some patterns or some particular pieces of equipment that need more maintenance more often, then you would do it more often. But most of mine are set up for every 6 months. And basically once a year is really kind of like the really big maintenance, where the vacuum pump, the compressor, all those filters, everything gets changed on everything. And then the next 6 month is just kind of reinforced, or some of the filters and things like that.
Thank you, Bob. That's great. And then someone asked a question about a product that I'm unfamiliar with called Minto Clean. Are you familiar with Minto Clean?
I've heard of that and I've seen it. It's just something that has a minty flavor to it. It is a water. It used to come in its own bottle when I remember it from years ago, and you would just screw their bottle in place of the bottle that's currently there.
Okay.
You used to buy it in cases like that.
Got it. Sounds like it's kind of expensive. I don't know if it's by the water bottle. I mean, seems to me the least expensive probably is just regular water with that tablet put in every time you change the water bottle. But
yes,
I'm not familiar with Minto Clean. I don't know that, and I'm not sure what it would do to your line. So we'll leave that out for now. All right, that's all the questions we have now, Bob. Why don't you move on to autoclaves?
Very good. Autoclaves. There's a couple different types of autoclaves. This picture here shows it's a Lisa sterilizer, I think it is. Any autoclave that has a water reservoir, you're going to want to take in once a week. You want to dump all that water that's in there and out. Again, you don't want your water to sit and breed anything or grow anything in it. So once a week you take and you dump all that water out, and once a month you want to take and run a cleaner through it. Every manufacturer's this is the one product that no manufacturer is the same on that, and they all offer their own product. They give you a specific of how to do it. The Omni cleaner that's shown in the picture here, you would dilute that into a 1 gallon or 3 gallons of water, distilled water, and then you would put it in the reservoir after you drained it. You'd run a cycle, and then you would take and run another cycle with just regular water, wipe everything out, and then run another cycle with regular water. And usually it's 2 to 3 cycles that you're going to run when you do a cleaning. Your like statums and things like that too, they don't reuse the water, so the water stays cleaner longer, but it's still a very good idea to take and drain that water out on a regular basis. I recommend it once a week. Most of the manufacturers recommend that once a week for everything. When you're running your autoclaves too, especially when you're doing the cleanings, just inspect all the gaskets, your door gaskets and everything. Most of the manufacturers, your Tuttenauers, your Midmarks, their gaskets are interchangeable. So you can reverse the gasket and you'll get an extended life out of it. So maybe once a month or every 6 months or so, take and reverse the gasket. You'll get a longer life out of it and you won't have any steam leaks. There are also a series of filters on the sterilizers. If you have a Class B sterilizer like this Lisa's, I believe it is, it's a Lisa. Tuttenauer has them too. There's HEPA filters and their air filters you have to replace at least once a year. And there's water filters inside of them. Some of these things, some of the manufacturers make them easy so that you can actually do that maintenance for yourself in the office, and others you have to take the covers off and get to, and it's much more cumbersome. Again, depending on the device you have and how ambitious you are, and just follow them, what's in the manual for them. Most of them are really good. Most manufacturers now have all their manuals online. They have either a video online or very good illustrated instructions on how to do the maintenance, and it's usually pretty straightforward. I mean, most of them have really worked at making it easy for the clinician to do it and not have somebody come in to do it. And that just extends the life of your product too. Your sterilizers will last a lot longer if the internal parts are clean. It's no different than your dental unit. When you're running a steam sterilizer, like this sterilizer here that's here, it's going to take and dump water inside the chamber, boils that water in there, and then it expels some of the steam periodically through it. And then it takes and regenerates that water back into a reservoir, and then it's going to use that water again. So you want to make sure that everything's in there clean and you're not bringing any kind of impurities into that water. And again, that's why you would drain it once a week too, to get rid of that stuff. Also for autoclaves, which I don't think I know we don't have a slide for it, but I'd also bring up your instrument washers. There is maintenance that needs to be done in your instrument washers. There are filters on them. There's cleaner to run through them. You just want to make sure, it's basically a very high-end dishwasher is what they are. So if you're familiar with a dishwasher at home and how to clean out your filters and stuff like that, you do the same things with your instrument washer. Hand pieces.
Bob, let's stop for one second. The one thing I wanted to add to what Bob said was the autoclave is absolutely one product, one piece of equipment where you should have extra parts in your office ready to go. Because if you need a gasket or whatever, so whoever your trusted service professional is, ask that person for your specific autoclave to get the right gasket, the right filters. But that's something where I think, Bob, you would agree, it's much easier to fix. Well, first of all, you can fix a lot of things yourself if you have the right parts. Always a good idea to have spare there because the service tech who shows up may not have the right part and then you're out for another day. So ask your service professional what parts you should have in your office to do the routine maintenance on your sterilizer in an emergency. You agree, Bob?
Absolutely. Whenever we go in and do an install, or we're doing preventive maintenance, have a box or a drawer or somewhere in that office that they give us. The customer will give us somewhere to store things like that, and we have those things there. Hand pieces. Most offices now have some kind of automatic maintenance device. And it has really improved the turbine life of a lot of the hand pieces now because it's pre-measured doses instead of, am I going to spray for 2 seconds, 3 seconds, or half a second? But it is very important. If your hand piece needs to be lubricated, please lubricate it the right way every time. You will get a lot more life out of your turbine and you'll just be a lot happier in the long run. It will operate much better for you. The clean and lube stations that are out there also require maintenance. So there's air filters on them, and you've got to add oil, and you've got to add the cleaner to them. So you want to make sure that they're operating properly. Aerosols in the office obviously now is a very, very big thing. And a lot of these clean and lube stations do have, they have for years, an aerosol filter on them. So you want to make sure you change that aerosol filter once a year at least, unless you start to see oil dripping or something like that. But I've never seen them, needed any more than once a year. On your slow speed handpieces, primarily we're talking about the high speed with the clean and lubes. The Johnson's oil that's shown up here, you would just take on your slow speed motors and stuff like that. You just put a drop in there and run them through, and you either do that on your unit or you would do it on some kind of clean and lube station that you'd have in your sterilization area or your lab. Now, what that does also, if you don't have a clean and lube station and you've got lube in your handpieces, an excessive amount of lube, and you don't blow it out, what's going to happen is when you go and hook it up on your unit, almost every unit on the market right now has some kind of oil collection system so that the exhaust air doesn't drip out onto the patient or onto your chair or anything like that. So all this oil is collected inside of a little collector. It's 99% of the time, it's either right on the bottom of your unit or it's on the back of your unit. And it either unscrews or just pops off. And that's all that's in there is a couple pieces of 2x2 gauze that you put in there and you replace on a regular basis, however often it fills up. Typically, if you have a clean and lube station that you use in your handpieces on a regular basis, you don't need to clean that out or replace the gauze in that, but maybe once or twice a year. If you don't have a good clean and lube station for your handpieces, you're one of the service calls that we get where you got oil dripping out of a unit, and it's not the unit that's dripping the oil, it's the oil from the handpieces that gets thrown into this collector and it doesn't get changed. I don't think we have a picture of that, but if you take a look at your unit and you see a little cup on the bottom or on the back of it, that's an oil collection system, and that just needs to be cleaned out every now and then and replace it with gauze inside. X-rays. One of the things with X-rays, and cone beam X-rays are big in dental, obviously now, and I work on those a lot, and I work with setting up the installs and the maintenance on them. Every X-ray, every manufacturer recommends every piece of X-ray equipment getting inspected at least once a year for functionality. Functionality is one thing, but the 3D units now, you need to make sure that they're accurate. And the only way you're going to do that is a QA test. And every manufacturer sends a QA phantom for their 3A or for their 3D units, and you need to run that through. And I've been working with the New York State inspectors now because New York's changed their laws and they're going to change them again very shortly here. Every office needs to do at least once a month, take an image for QA, and you need to store that on your workstation for your 3D machine so that when the inspector comes in once a year, well, New York State it's once a year, I think Pennsylvania is the same way now, they're going to ask to see those tests. So you're going to need to go to this file and say, okay, here's 2021, these are all my QA tests and everything passed. But once a year, the machine should be calibrated, especially a 3D machine. And some manufacturers basically say you must need to do it, and they all have, I think all but a few manufacturers now have automatic counters on them of when they need to have some kind of calibration done, and they will keep giving you an error code that says calibration due, calibration due. You can always close out of that calibration due error code, but it's always just reminding you need to have the calibration. So a lot of the 3D machines that we have, we are doing once a year. We're in there doing some kind of calibration or calibration check on that 3D machine. On your handheld, which are very big now too, you just want to make sure that your batteries are working good, and you want to make sure that the guard on there, the little disc on there, the filter, make sure it doesn't have any cracks, it's in good shape, it's not bent or anything like that. I can't really think of anything else for X-ray right now, but I said the cone beams really have been a big thing for us now with inspections and just how they get installed and where they get installed. And it's a lot of states are starting to get a lot more involved with where they go and how they're used.
So Bob, we had one question come in, and also I want to throw out there, and I wanted to ask you just a question myself. First one is, you showed an X-ray, a lead apron on the left side. They're not all lead anymore. They have different products in them, but make sure that those aprons are hung flat down and they're not folded, right? We want to make sure that
Correct, yes. Because that
the
way you
lead
can get, if they're not hung like you see here, and they're folded over or whatnot, they can get cracks in them. And if they get a crack in them, the radiation is going to go right through the crack.
correct. So you want to make sure you hang your aprons. We used to say lead aprons. They're, as I say, most of them are not lead anymore. You want to make sure you hang that apron all the way down, not folding it during the day. Second one is very interested in this idea that the machine needs to be tested every month. So we're assuming that people want to check with their own state on what the requirement is. What's the department they should call the Department of Health or get on the website for the Department of Health for their own state, Bob?
Yeah, here's the funny part about that. There is no two states that call those departments the exact same thing.
Got it.
New York State calls it Department of Health Radiation Safety. And there's subcategories into that department. One is dental. And in Pennsylvania, it's the Department of Environmental something or other, I think it is. Every state's a little bit different, but they all have a similar department. I don't know what they're called in all 50 states.
So what you're saying is that you want to make sure you know what your state's rules are. And in the state of New York, they're not yet there. They're not yet there, but they are going to go to a test image every month that needs to be filed so that the inspector can see it when the inspector.
New York State is currently enforcing that now.
Oh, they are currently enforcing that.
They are currently enforcing it. For our from a standpoint of doing installations, what they're going to want to see soon, Pennsylvania currently does this, is you have to do a radiation survey, and they will not let you install a 3D machine until you submit a survey. So they want to know where the machine's going, how far away the operator is going to stand. It's all based around the radiation safety policies of the office. So that's a written policy you're going to have. This is where the operator has to stand. So that way they know where all the measured doses of scatter radiation is, so that you don't fall outside of, or you don't go over what the recommendations are for radiation exposure.
Got it. So we had a question come in. Is the QA test required for a 2D machine as well, or only a 3D?
Just a 3D machine.
Just a 3D, yeah, that makes sense.
Only 3D machines.
And then someone asked, does Cavicide ruin a lead apron? I don't know that. I don't think so, but what is your opinion on that, Bob?
I have a love-hate relationship with Cavicide.
Tell us more.
It is probably one of the best products at killing germs and cleaning equipment. It is also one of the worst products if concentration's too high, if it's less on too long, it destroys everything. Got it.
So for a lead apron, for example, Cavicide would be fine as long as it's used properly at the proper mix, right? And it's not left on too long. You shouldn't just spray it and leave it. You want to spray it and wipe it off, correct?
Right. Cavicide is a disinfectant, and most disinfectants, especially if this is a soft surface we're talking about, but solid surfaces, you spray it on and then you leave it for a measured amount of time, and then you wipe it off. Very few disinfectants you spray on and leave.
Got it. So you want to make sure that when you spray to disinfect it, that you're using it properly, because what I hear you saying, Bob, is when it stays on too long, it kills the germs, but it also breaks down whatever it's sprayed on over time.
Just a transition into something a little bit funny. I was asked to work with one of our manufacturing partners because of a number of product failures after COVID, the startup. And the most numerous product failures we're talking about were plastic parts, cracking, and the manufacturer's already done some investigating with it. And what it is there's been a tenfold increase in use in disinfectants, which is good and bad. Now we know a lot of places are cleaner than they used to be, and sometimes that's good. Some people were doing good before, some people weren't.
Right.
But what's happening is these disinfectants are staying on these pieces of dental equipment longer than they should, and the concentrations are higher than they really should by definition from the manufacturer. And and where the thought process comes from is, and I hear this from staff and offices, is if a little bit's good, a little bit more is better. It's really not. It really isn't. You're just degrading the plastic on there so much, and especially some of the metals too corrode. And what this one manufacturer I'm working with now is they've actually changed the compound of their plastics so that some of it's more flexible and less porous, so that it holds up better against this prolonged use of the disinfectants.
Thank you, Bob.
And we've
Go
seen it on Panorexes too a lot, on both 2D and 3D. We've replaced panels and covers on a lot of machines, and most of it comes back to disinfectant use that just corrodes the plastic, makes it brittle.
Disinfectant use outside of the recommendation by the manufacturer. That's really what
Correct.
you're saying, right?
Yes.
Someone asked, what do you use to wipe off the apron after spraying it with Cavicide? I assume it's just a regular Seafold towel of some sort, right?
Yeah, I would use either, well, depending on the material of the apron. If it's kind of coarse, you don't want to use a paper towel. You could use like a microfiber towel, because if you use a paper towel, you get all that debris. You would actually kind of scrape off some of the paper on there. I keep in my van, and I keep a good supply of microfiber towels in the Ziploc bags or some kind of secured thing so they don't get contaminated. And that's what I use to wipe down equipment after we do installs and stuff like that, to make sure everything is the way it should be. And a lot of manufacturers tell you right in their literature not to use paper towels for anything because it scratches the surfaces, to use a microfiber towel.
A microfiber towel would be like
A cloth towel.
a cloth towel. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I buy them in bulk, like at either Walmart or BJ's or something like that. I'll buy them in bulk. They're pretty inexpensive.
Thank you, Bob. All right, go ahead.
Oh, that's it. I'm done.
Oh, Bob, you're awesome. So we've been answering questions as we've gone along. Oh, someone said they need to see my whole shirt because the part we're seeing looks X-rated. It's a picture of skiers. It's not X-rated. Tara, I don't know where you're from, but it's actually a picture of skiers because we're up skiing for a few days. But from here, it looks X-rated. I'm okay with that as well. Are there any other questions before we close off for the evening? We're almost at the end of our hour. Any other questions for Bob, our equipment service expert?
We do have some other questions coming in, Chuck. And I just have really one. If someone buys all their equipment, how we do recare and we have a recall system that we remind the clients that it's time. Do we do anything like that? I mean, do we have like a recall reminder, or we give them a checklist or anything like that?
Bob, you want to take that one?
Sure. At the end of the installation, usually one of our guys one of our people that are doing the install, when everything is done, we do an in-service training for the customer. And we'll go through all the products, and we will also tell them or try to review with them what the preventive maintenance is, or any kind of maintenance that's recommended by the manufacturer. And then we'll also present them with all the manuals for everything. And what I'll do a lot of times is I will recommend that we set up a PM for a year from now or 6 months from here or whatever. A lot of times what I'll do, especially a big office, we do a large scale install. I'll come back in a month later just to make sure everything's good. There's always going to be something that needs an adjustment, or you're never going to remember everything that somebody tells you. You get this brand new office. It's like, there's a ton of new stuff there. It's like, you're not going to remember everything. I understand that. I get that. I'm the same way. I'm going to go back. You buy a new car. It's like a month later. Hey, I didn't know it could do this.
Exactly.
So Bob, we had one more question come in, and I think we're just at the 8 o'clock. So we'll make this one our last one. Can you review the good steps with cleaning the operatories? So could you go over, since we talked about a lot, and it's interesting because since COVID, I agree with you, Bob, there's a lot more emphasis on infection control, but some of it is a little bit out of hand, more than necessary, and also breaking down some of the equipment. So can you review the steps in cleaning the operatories, the chair and the surfaces, when to use Cavicide sprays versus wipes versus soap and water? Bob?
Chairs are a huge one because the upholstery, again, Cavicide, love-hate relationship. Cavicide destroys upholstery. It makes it brittle, it cracks, and then you've got cracks in the upholstery, and then it holds liquids, whatever else. Most manufacturers for upholstery, you disinfect maybe once or twice a day, because a patient's going to sit in there and they're actually sitting in the chair on the fabric, and they're in clothing, so it's not skin to skin contact or skin to that product contact. It's it's a different class of equipment. It's not direct contact. And most manufacturers recommend a more mild cleaning agent for those. Like Fantastic is recommended by quite a few of the manufacturers for upholstery. You just spray Fantastic on it. You let it sit for a couple minutes. You if you need to, scrub it a little bit and then wipe it off.
All right, Bob, with that, there are a couple other questions coming in. We'll try to answer those afterwards directly to the people who asked them. Bob, thank you very much for a tremendously informative evening. Thank you very much for sharing all of your knowledge and expertise. And with that, I'm going to say thank you to Bob and turn things over to Kay to take us to end the session. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
both.
you.
That was
Thank you, Chuck.
amazing. I really do. And Bob, I just want to say one more thing. Now, you are going to send us out in a laminate, right? That I mean, like something that they can laminate for some instructions. Am I correct?
Yes, you're all going to get a present. We're going to get
Yay!
a little checklist, little maintenance sheet. Everybody will get it.
Yay! And I tell you guys, make sure you, when he sends you the sheet, I would hang it, like I would laminate it because I'm a laminator person, and I would hang it up somewhere in your office so that you can have it. And I see that we have a lot more questions coming in. Just know that we will make sure that we get to all your questions. We're not going to leave you hanging. We'll have to type them up and we'll get them out to you as soon as this is probably in the next 2 or 3 days. So just look for the Q&A and everybody will have a copy of that. So again, thank you so much, Bob. You did a fantastic job, the same as you did as always. We're going to have to just continue this.
Okay, sounds good, Kate. Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Go ahead, Alyssa. So guys, please make sure you scan this QR code. This will give you a good list of the upcoming webinars. So please, if you scan this, just take your phone, hold your phone in front of it, scan it, and it'll take you right to our site. So you'll see the upcoming webinars. Mark your calendar. Don't forget. Now we have a great webinar. I mean, it's a panelist webinar, so it's going to be really good. It's going to be presented by the Lucy Hobbs Project. It's going to be Women in Dentistry, Celebrating History and Making History. It's going to be on Wednesday, March 31st from 6:45 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So please make sure you mark your calendars. And then we're also going to have a really good one with Dr. Convisor again. It's going to be on myths, hypes, and other tall tales about laser dentistry. It's going to be a fantastic webinar. It's going to be on April the 7th from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So please make sure you mark your calendars down for that one. And then we have one upcoming workshop. It's going to be a 2-hour workshop. It's going to really go into more detail. It's going to be expanding your practice with oral cancer detection and biopsy techniques. So please make sure that you mark your calendar down if you'd like to know more about that. It's going to be $49 a person. It's going to be on April the 23rd from 1 to 3 Eastern Time. Again, and the way that you will sign up for this is you will go to shop.benco.com, put in the item number that you see here, and it will take you directly to it and walk you through it. Again, and you will receive 2 CEs for this one. And then I just want to remind everyone, if you dialed in on your phone, don't worry, you don't have to email us. We are going to be, all you have to do, if you dialed in on your phone, just email me your telephone number, your name, and the name of the course to practicecoaching@benco.com. If you were on your phone and you click the link, you're good to go. We'll be able to see you only if you dialed in on your phone. If you have any other questions or feedback, please make sure you let us know. Again, the email is practicecoaching@benco.com, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you and have a good evening. Bye-bye.